Okay, that's this is the stuff of disaster movies, isn't it? But can we play the film and maybe I think you can talk over it if you want.
Right. Well, this is the Marshall Islands, and this is landing in Majuro, which is the capital island. We're doing this is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world because essentially the land level is only a few inches above the high tide mark. Now, and the winter solstice high tides at the end of December last year, hundreds of people in these islands were flooded out of their homes, and they had to declare a national state of emergency. It's going to happen again in a few days from now because that's a regular phenomenon because it's the high tide of the year, but
there you are.
Worse and worse. It's getting worse and worse every year, and so it's a very serious issue. So what we're doing is I'm a co-inventor with an architect who died 2 years ago named Wolf Hilberts of a technology that we call BioRock. And we use low-voltage direct current to grow limestone in the sea, speed up the growth of corals about 2 to 6 times faster than normal, and make them 16 to 50 times more likely to survive high temperatures. So we can grow reefs back where they would die. We can, we can keep them alive where they would die. We can grow them back in a few years where they can't recover naturally. And what we've been able to do in the Maldives and Indonesia, and what we're doing here in the Marshall Islands, is trying to grow these reefs back in order to grow back their beaches and prevent them washing away. Now, these islands they're about to disappear. The people are desperately poor. This is an outer atoll. These people live off fish and coconuts. That's all they have. So, they're lucky to get $1 a day. Here we're building structures here out of steel. Now, everyone expects that this would rust in the ocean, but they don't. When we put electricity, we stop rusting. This is a structure in the form of a traditional Marshallese stick chart, which is their traditional way of teaching navigation of ocean swells. Here we're building domes, and these are trickle charged with a very small trickle charge from a solar panel. So we're able to use sustainable energy resources to grow these reefs, and this is a windmill that we just installed, a vertical axis windmill in the Marshall Islands. We're using wave power generators, solar and wind, and tidal current. So we're in the middle of this project. So it's a pilot project, but we're trying to show people that there is a solution there if we have the political will and if we have the funding to help these people. Otherwise, they're going to lose their whole country. And they have large amounts of sustainable energy resources that they're not using. The tragedy is they spend almost all their foreign exchange earnings importing diesel fuel, and it's only the capital atoll that gets it. These people in the outer atolls don't have any electricity at all.
That's a fantastic film. And when you talk about mitigation and adaptation and you hear these words in the conference, that's it really, isn't it? If we don't mitigate, they lose everything. But you can adapt if you're innovative and
I mean, and what's so worrisome to me is that this conference is essentially condemning coral reefs and the people who live off them and live in the low islands to death. If we're not serious, we really have to reverse the CO2 bill. It's not a matter of letting it rise or stabilize at some level. We actually have to reverse global warming and CO2 buildup in order to save them. And the technologies exist to do that. And so one of the things I've been involved in is I'm the founder and the coordinator of the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development, Small Island Developing States Partnership in New Sustainable Technologies. That's quite a mouthful, but anyway, the purpose...
Sure, there's a wonderful acronym for it.
The purpose of that is to really present to the UN Commission on Sustainable Development really innovative technologies that are not being used because people aren't aware of them or are not willing to invest in them. But the fact is we have a lot of solutions, and we've just released yesterday to all governments, a multimedia DVD. That is to say, you can launch websites right off it. It's actually a flexible disk. It's completely new technology, and that contains 40 chapters on innovative new technologies that we believe for things like sustainable energy production, waste recycling to make fuels, fertilizers, and clean water, for carbon sequestration, for sustainable agriculture and mariculture, that we think as a package are the sort of things that we need to be doing on a large scale, and we aren't. We think the solutions are there if we only have the will. And so our purpose is to try to bring these forward and hope that the world really starts doing the right thing in time to avert catastrophe.
I hate to move away from this extraordinary exposition, but Jeff Allen, my colleague, he's monitoring Twitter feeds and email. So if a question comes up, we throw it at you, and I'm sure you're more than capable of dealing with any question.
Yeah, this fascinating presentation has raised a lot of questions and comments on OneClimate.net, where most of our viewers are watching. A few things let me throw at you. One person wants to know, we've been talking a lot about temperature rise numbers. 3 degrees is what many people say we're now headed towards if nothing changes in the emissions pledges. Some have talked about 2 degrees that being necessary. Small island states have said 1.5 degrees is necessary. One of our viewers wants to know, at what temperature will all the coral reefs disappear? And then another one of our viewers wants to know, do you feel that politicians are open to your findings, or are they unwilling to listen to bad news? And then finally, what I want to know is, this is just an amazing presentation about what you're able to do to regrow coral reefs. So doesn't that mean that the coral reefs are now saved because you found a way to regenerate them?
Well, they're only saved if we can supply power to them. That's the limitation of our method. And essentially that means we've got to develop sustainable energy, ocean energy technologies in order to generate DC power on the site. We're just in the beginnings of that. I mean, we're working with top innovators in wave and tidal current energy, for example. Solar power is really too expensive now to be really competitive. Wind is borderline, but some of these new turbines we're using, the vertical axis ones, are going to work at much lower wind speeds and have less friction and produce more power. So I think there's some options there. Now, sorry, you had a lot of questions though, and let me to go back to some of them. I mean, we've as I said earlier, we've already lost most of the corals in the world to heat shock in the last 20 years. So it's not a matter of further temperature rise. We can't afford any further temperature rise. Now, the difficulty is there's a large amount of warming in the pipeline. And it's not just 2 or 3 that people are talking about. It's more like 6 or 15. Because if once temperature comes to equilibrium or steady state with the current level of CO2, it'll be much warmer than that. Now, the problem is that heat is being absorbed by CO2, but it's going into the deep sea. As the deep sea turns over, that heat goes down. It takes about 1,000 years for the ocean to turn over. So that heat is just kind of going down. And until the deep sea is warmed up, we won't feel that full effect at the surface. Now, it could happen more quickly than that, though, because one of the things we're doing...
Okay, we just had to break into there. There was the shortest news conference in the history of the world, with the organizers here saying that looks like we could be here till 5 in the morning. Who knows? I think it's anyone's guess at this point, including the organizers. So we were talking about coral reefs. Let's head right back to that discussion. The question on the table was, do you feel that politicians are listening to your findings, or are they unwilling to listen to bad news?
They're not really ready yet. I mean, I think one of the disappointments here is that we've had a blizzard of smokescreen proposals from the big fossil fuel consumers and producers designed to keep business as usual, going with minimum disruption. And unfortunately, I think that the leaders of the developing countries have not fully grasped the changes that lie ahead of us and aren't really speaking out as forcefully as I wish they would in their own long-term interests. I mentioned to you about the ocean. See, one thing we're seeing happening is the surface ocean is warming up in some places so quickly that cold water no longer is able to mix to the surface. When that happens, the rate of surface warming could accelerate quite a bit. And so I think we're not expecting a continuous increase. It goes up by starts and jumps. And the next jump upward is really going to be a large shock to a lot of people.
What is one of our other viewers wants to know, what's the best that we can hope for as far as coral reefs are concerned?
Well, I think the best is that we start as quickly as possible introducing carbon negative technologies to actually draw down the excess of CO2 in the atmosphere. I mean, I think it's fairly clear that the transition to sustainable energy is not going to be as fast as we would like. So simply controlling emissions alone is not going to be sufficient. We have to increase the sinks of CO2 at the same time that we reduce the sources. There's got to be a balanced and integrated approach. One difficulty we face in these negotiations is that we're not really seeing honest and complete global accounting of all greenhouse gases, sources, and sinks. People are confusing net sources with gross sources. They're confusing sources with sinks. And there are large areas that, sinks that are not accounted for. I mean, to give one example, you're able to get carbon credits for planting trees. But the tree ultimately dies and puts the CO2 back in the atmosphere. The real sink is the soil. but you can't get carbon credits for increasing soil carbon, even though that's the most effective sink that we can manipulate. So there are a lot of holes in these treaties. They need to be complete, and they need to cover the whole world. Now, because countries only have to count for their country, who's responsible for the open ocean or the deep sea? But there are carbon, there's carbon going in and out there, and really a global solution must include the whole world.